Hi everyone, Stjepan here. In today's daily chess test, I have two positions for you. One of them is easy, but I think very important for practical knowledge in early middle games and messed up openings. And the second one should broaden your horizons in complicated endgames, hopefully. Okay, let's start. You have the rules on the screen as always. Solve the positions over a real board. Time yourself 15 minutes per position. Don't move the pieces when analyzing and write your analysis down. Just pause the video. This is the first position. It's from one of my training games. And see you in a minute. Good luck. Okay, this position arose from one of my favorite openings. It's the Kramnik Sicilian, and my opponent had messed up the opening. And as you can see, I got a big initiative because of a big lead in development. Now, my last move was rook e1, simply provoking bishop e7, and now it's white to play and basically cash out on his lead in development. So hopefully you did find the correct idea. Let's just first look at the factors in this position. There's only two, basically, which should bring you very close to the solution, or which should make you, well, be able to see the solution clearly. The first one is the pinned bishop on e7, and the second one, which sort of relates to that, is the king on e8. And if you give black a move, if black manages to play castles short, then fine, you're still slightly better because you have a slight lead in development, but it's not, yeah, actually you're not better, you don't have a lead in development, but you have somewhat better activity. So what you need to understand in this position is that black shouldn't be allowed to castle. And when you look at that, this bishop is defended 3 times by the queen, by the king, and by the knight on c6. So the correct way to play this position, and the only way to play this position, if you want to be able to prevent black from castling, is to remove the defenders of the e7 bishop and basically double attack it. So the correct way to play is, of course, bishop takes c6. Now there are two options, they both lose. There's nothing black can do at this point. If he takes, the reason why you don't take with the knight is because b takes gains a tempo on the bishop, and that way you lose a move, giving black a move to castle. So bishop takes is absolutely correct. Now in the game it was taken with the b pawn. If bishop takes, it doesn't really matter, you still do the same thing. The idea is queen to e2, of course, and after queen to e2 your knight cannot be taken because you take with mate if he takes with the bishop. And if, for example, king to f8, then you can simply continue developing and you play bishop to f4. The idea behind bishop to f4 is, of course, rook to d1. Now, if queen takes knight, it's game over. Queen e7 check, king g8, rook a d1. And black resigns because, well, there's a mate coming up, or you win a million pieces. So that doesn't really work. And after bishop f4, is if something like queen d7 is tried, then still rook a to d1. For example, rook e8 defending the bishop, and now queen to c4. And obviously, this is attacked. This is attacked. If, for example, king to g8, then knight e6 straight away, attacking the queen. The knight cannot be taken because you take the queen. If bishop to d6, for example, then simply rook takes d6. It's just win a million pieces. So bishop takes c6 is no good. In the game, b takes c6 was played, and I played queen to e2, and it's game over. Black has no moves. So basically, by cashing out on your early advantage, you forced black into a position where he can just resign. I know this position was easier than the previous ones, but I think it's very important to not miss an opportunity like this during a real game, which I've done many times before. So you take the knight, he takes back, you play queen e2. Now castles, which was played in the game, fails to a tactical response. He castled, I took the bishop on e7, he was counting on rook e8, winning my queen. Unfortunately that doesn't work because I just take, and the rook is pinned to the king, so I'm just a piece up. So after queen takes e7, he played queen to b6. I played bishop e3, developing my pieces, queen takes b2, queen c5, and that's game over. After queen to e2, alternatives don't really exist. I mean, he can try something like rook c8, but you still just play bishop f4 and you continue. I mean, for example, bishop f4, c5, knight db5. You're going to play rook ad1 and win. So that was the first position. I know it was easier than the previous ones. I still think it's important because this is a pattern which I've seen many times in games like by players like Kasparov, where he just seizes the moment every time. He never lets an advantage slip, because this is a dynamic advantage. You don't really have a material edge, you don't have anything if you don't do something now. If you allow black another move, this is almost equal, if not equal. All right, the second position is beautiful. Okay, this is of course much harder than the first one. I've had a lot of fun with this position, so did some of my chess friends whom I gave this one to. So it's white to play. Be careful. Factor in all the details in the position. It's not easy. It may seem easy, but it's not easy. So pause the video. Good luck. See you in a minute. Okay. This position is very tricky. If you had it in a real game, I doubt many of us would manage to win this, and I'm going to show you why. Basically, most logical moves simply fail. Let me show you why. Let's start with the most logical move. One of the logical moves. If rook h4 attacking the bishop, then bishop e4 check, and if you take the bishop, it's stalemate. So you have to play something like king f6 or king h6. If you play king f6, then bishop takes h7, and this is a complete draw. The king is in the corner, perfectly safe. No way to win unless black voluntarily loses. Same goes for king h6, he just takes the pawn. And that's it. The move that came to most people as the most logical one is rook to a7, and one of my friends said when I gave this position to him, well, rook a7 and you just win. And I told him, look closer. So here's the problem. Black plays bishop e4 check. Your king is forced to move. You can go to g5 or you can go to h6. If you go to g5, then he just takes the pawn, and again we have the drawn position, so king h6, seemingly the most logical move. And now what white wants to do is simply do this and this, or checkmate. Okay. So black has a resource here which is very tricky to see, and that's bishop to b7. And again, if you take the bishop, it's a draw by stalemate. If you don't take the bishop, that means you have to move your rook, because if you move the king, he's going to take the pawn. So for example, rook to a5, and now bishop e4 again, and black threatens to win the pawn. Of course, if you don't have rook a8 check. So for example, rook to b5, threatening mate, bishop h7, rook b8 check, bishop g8, draw. So rook a7 doesn't work, rook h4 doesn't work. Now let's look at the better continuations. King h6 was a candidate move that was tried by many people who try to solve this position, but king h6 again fails to the very simple tactical resource, bishop e4. And again, you don't have rook a8 mate. If you take the bishop, it's stalemate. So you either have to move the rook or you have to move the king. If you try rook a7, again bishop to b7, same thing. If you try something like king to g5, then bishop takes h7, and you're basically in Zugzwang yourself. If you try something else, whatever else you try, he just takes the pawn, and that's it. So king h6 doesn't work. Another very logical move is king to f6. Okay, of course, if king takes pawn, then rook h4 wins the game, so that's not going to be played. But black has an amazing way to draw, or a couple of amazing ways to draw. So he basically moves the bishop away. For example, bishop to f3. Now, you only have rook f4 and rook a3 as sensible moves. Nothing else really makes sense, because he is, he is threatening to play king takes h7 now that the bishop has moved. So let's say you try rook to a3 and now simply bishop to a4. Again, there's nothing you can do. If you play rook a7 now, then bishop takes pawn, not king takes pawn. If, for example, rook c3 threatening mate, then bishop takes h7 again. And after bishop f3, if you try something like rook f4 attacking the bishop this way, then bishop to e2, and again you don't have anything. You're blocking your rook. The pawn is unpre, and for example rook e4, bishop to b5. Doesn't really matter. You can go anywhere. But yeah, you want to be blocking the checks. Ideally, for example, rook b4, bishop d3. Nothing's happening here. Rook b6, you just take the pawn, and that's it. So that brings us to the best move. Now, the best move is king to g5. The reason why this counterintuitive move is the best move is because it gives your king the option to come to h6 in one move. If you're on f6, it takes two moves. If you're on h6, then it's stalemate. So, against king to g5, there is nothing black can do. Okay, if he moves the king outside, you queen and then play rook h4, take the pawn. If he takes the pawn, you play rook h4, takes the pawn. So the king is in Zugzwang. The only piece black can move is the bishop. So black again wants to move the bishop and then take the pawn. So where does he move the bishop? Let's say bishop to c6, attacking the rook. It doesn't really matter whatever he does. Wherever he moves the bishop is the same thing. What you want to do, you want to keep attacking the bishop until you are given a tempo, and then you play king h6 and it's game over. So rook c4, bishop to d5, for example, attacking the rook. Rook to d4. Now there is no more tempi to be gained on the rook, and the bishop is attacked. And now once the bishop moves, let's say bishop to h1, doesn't really matter where, then king h6, and it's game over. There's no more check. There's no more bishop to b7 because your rook is on the d file. He cannot prevent rook d8 mate. There's nothing he can do. He can give up the bishop. You don't have to take it. And yeah, that's game over. So hopefully you did manage to see that. I know this one was a bit harder, and it was definitely much harder than the previous one, but I think it's very instructive because in these types of endgames, it's important to think about the little details, and solving positions like this one should train you to spot the details and hopefully not mess this up as many of my friends have. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you tomorrow for another test, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.